our guest today is Brad Messmer. He's a PhD and CEO of Abreos Biosciences. Thank you so much for being with us again today, Brad. We really appreciate you coming back.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Well, thanks for coming back. It's been about a year and 3 or 4 months. So take us on a journey, what's been going on the last 15 months or so, and tell us about the company and what you really set out to accomplish.
Yeah, so it's been a very exciting 15 months for us. We, of course, are a startup company, which means we're always looking for money, and we recently closed a funding round with some more private individual investors, so we're very excited to have the funding we need to continue on.
Awesome.
If you recall, our company is focused around precision medicine, and in particular, dose monitoring for very expensive drugs that treat cancer, autoimmunity, and other serious conditions.
So what 15 months, when last time we saw you, what's the major, has it been like a major transition, breakthrough, or what's been happened?
Yeah, so the science is progressing, which is good, but what's really been exciting for us is our business development activities, in particular talking to pharmaceutical companies. We've seen a big shift in enthusiasm for personalized medicine and precision medicine approaches such as ours.
Well, that's good news.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So why is dosing so important, and are you going to need to do clinical trials? And if you do, what kind of subjects do you need for those trials? How many sites do you plan on having across the country so people can kind of be aware of where you're going to be?
Yeah, so the reason that dosing is important, particularly with these drugs, so we focus on the class of drugs called biologics, and these are very expensive drugs. A single dose can cost thousands of dollars, and the annual cost of therapy for patients can be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there's a strong economic reason to try to get the dose right and not take more of these drugs than you need. Some of them have side effects as well, so minimizing side effects is always important. And then the flip side is that some patients actually, their bodies just get rid of these drugs very quickly and they don't work. And so to be on a very expensive drug that's not working is not in anyone's interest. So that's really the core basis for what we're doing. We want to help the patients get the most benefit from these powerful but expensive drugs. And to go to your question of clinical trials, we're now actually starting to set up plans for our first clinical studies for one of the drugs that we're looking at. In general, we can actually offer laboratory tests without clinical trials, without FDA approval, but we ultimately want to have FDA-approved tests.
So I'm going to go a little political, given the controversy with the Food and Drug Administration, given the new administration, or maybe not so new anymore. Where is that, do you see a loosening up of that? Do you see a more advantageous situation, or where do you see that going?
That's a loaded question. So far actually things have not changed very much as far as we can tell. We actually just had a phone call with FDA a couple weeks ago, and it sort of went by the numbers. The agency is very concerned about patient safety and are very careful not to take chances, which can be frustrating at some level because those of us that want to do things right sometimes face a higher barrier than people that can cut some corners and go around. There are some loopholes that one can exploit, but ultimately we think that particularly if we're going to work with pharmaceutical companies who want things to be done right, we'll work with the agency the way that we're supposed to the best of our abilities.
There's a number of pharmaceutical companies in Europe. Are you able to do any research or work with them and maybe move things along a little quicker since they don't have as many FDA regulations as we do?
So that's a great question. Actually, we are working with many of the multinational pharmas. We actually are going to be doing a little clinical study in France. We actually have a subsidiary located in Marseille. So that we have.
Can we come? We like to go.
Yeah.
Can we go check that one out?
There are worse places to visit. And in fact, the weather's very similar to San Diego,
Yeah.
so it's easy on us, other than the time difference. But no, generally the Europeans, the big companies conform to European and FDA regulations across the board. So there's not too much of a difference in that sense, although for the economic rationale behind these drugs, the Europeans are definitely generally single-payer markets with national health systems who have to make these hard decisions about what they can afford to provide to their population. And so that's where, again, getting the dosing right and limiting the excessive use of drugs can really bring drugs to those patients that otherwise their health systems wouldn't pay for.
Which is why they might get on board maybe a little quicker.
Yeah, they certainly are driving the desire to have more cost-effective therapies. The UK has some very innovative programs where they essentially ask the drug manufacturers to take on some of the risk even after the drug's in the marketplace to show that, hey, it has to really work as well as it did during the clinical trials, or else you're going to have to pay us back for the drug. So I think they're more pioneers in these kind of health economic models than we are.
So does your is it a product that somebody would digest, or is it a product that somebody, how would it work?
So it's a blood test, and
Okay.
it can work in it can take a number of forms. It could be a laboratory test where blood would be drawn and then sent to a lab, like is done for a lot of other things, but we're also developing point-of-care solutions so that a finger stick of blood right there in the physician's office could give you the measure of how much drug is there, so that
Just
there
like a
wouldn't...
blood sugar test.
Yeah, the glucose monitoring for diabetes is really the model that we ultimately think is the way to go.
Could somebody do this at home? I mean, obviously not always the doctor's office, so somebody could do this at home.
Yeah, that's our ultimate goal. Some of these drugs are actually self-injected by patients at home, and so obviously it'd be nice if the test that guides the dosing could be done. We have a prototype device that has Bluetooth enabled. It can talk to the cloud, so the physician could see the information, but the test could be done at home.
Wow.
So being, the whole thing is unbelievably fantastic. What would be any objection? Who would object to something like this?
Well, again, the drug companies have an interest in selling more drug. Now, they are, as I said, they're very concerned about patient safety, and we believe, and I think we're seeing this now, that better drugs are better drugs for everyone, and they will sell more. And these markets are getting competitive, so there's a greater desire to differentiate one drug from another. But there is a history, I think, of trying to make things simple. So traditionally, they like simple dosing. One dose fits all. I mean, take 2 aspirin, call me in the morning, not 2.5 for you and 1.5 for you. But I think that overall now there's a recognition that we can and we should be doing personalized medicine.
Especially with the more costly medications, and if somebody has an autoimmune disease, it's not something that's going to go away in 2 weeks. So you need to get it right over time, or the side effects could be devastating.
Yeah, well, we always say when your therapy costs as much as a Ferrari, it really should have a speedometer.
Yeah,
I like that. That's a good one.
That's a good one.
We'll have to, I don't know, somehow we'll have to use that. So when will you think the first tests, you're saying the first tests are available, or when will they be available?
So
clinically.
Yeah, so we do have a laboratory test that's ready to launch. We're looking for a laboratory partner with whom we can launch that test, and that would be for the drug Tisabri, which is used in multiple sclerosis. Our first FDA products, we've just initiated that process, so we're probably about 2 years away from the point of care solutions.
And that's not 510K then, that's...
No, it is. It's a 510K.
It's a 510K?
Yeah,
Okay.
class 2.
Okay.
Okay, what does that mean? She's pretty smart at all this stuff.
It means that there's something similar that they can relate it to that's already on the market versus starting from scratch.
Yeah, in our case, it's actually a de novo 510K because
Okay.
we don't have that precise predicate.
Okay.
But it does mean that we don't, in theory, don't have to show full clinical utility. We only have to show clinical validity, which is
Okay.
again, this is FDA speak. Basically, it says that we're measuring what we're measuring correctly. What you do with that information still ultimately is up to the physician.
So if somebody in the viewing audience has MS, should they contact you?
They're certainly welcome to, and particularly if they're on Tisabri, we can share some information about dosing. And I think, in general, any patient on these drugs should ask their doctor, how do you know that I'm getting the right amount? And in some cases, they may not get a good answer back, but at least creating that awareness among their physicians that they're worried
aware.
about it. And particularly in the personalized medicine space, patients can really drive a lot of the future of how care is going to be delivered.
I mean, are the doctors more, do you sense the doctors are more concerned about this? Is this something the doctors could drive to?
It varies by specialty. I think certainly in neurology for multiple sclerosis, the physicians are very aware of the risks of these drugs and they really want to get it right. So we've actually had them come to us and say, we want this now. In other diseases, particularly in cancer, it depends a little bit on the drugs. Some of them really don't have a history of worrying about precise levels. Sometimes they have bigger problems that they're dealing with. So it's interesting, in fact, how it varies across the different specialties.
Could it even be used for pain management?
Right now, no.
Okay.
The drugs that we measure are not the ones that are used in pain management, but obviously that's an area where people are very concerned about dosing and overdosing, and so we are looking at that.
Got it.
Well, I'll give you last word. What can we do to support you? I mean, it's just a fabulous product. It just seems like a fabulous thing.
Well, in the short term, just watch our growth and root for us. As I said, the FDA process is time consuming, and there's not much you can do to shorten that time. But we're always interested in patient stories. Those are very powerful. They help us raise money, but they also help us explain really the ultimate value of these types of tests. So
Patient stories being where they were not monitored properly.
yeah, or even if they're just on these drugs and they're worried. The other thing that's going to happen soon is the generic versions of some of these drugs are starting to come out, and so there's a lot of concern. Are they really going to perform the same? And so we're seeing a lot of interest there. So I think any patient who's worried about their drug of this class, we'd be happy to hear from them.
Okay,
Awesome.
you know all about, what do you,
I think it's awesome because, I mean, even when when pharma does a clinical trial, they have to set parameters for their subjects. And not everybody is within that parameter. Not everybody is a male or a female between 20 and 35 and, whose metabolism is exactly the same, whose diet is the same, whose exercise program is the same, and yet, like you said, take 2 of these and call me in the morning, and it just doesn't work that way for everybody.
Yeah, one of the dirty secrets of clinical trials is that patients in those trials are kind of the marathon runners of patients. As you said, it's not reflective of the general population, and certainly of older populations that may not be eligible for the criteria of the trial.
And mostly, there's very few, in the past, very few females as part of those trials.
Yeah, there's a lot of awareness of that now, so I think it's improving, but certainly historically it's been a big problem.
Yep.
well, Dr. Brad, we wish you much luck.
Thank
you
you
for returning and giving us an update. We really wish you much success. It's going to be done. I'm guaranteeing. I'm guaranteeing it here on Today. So stay tuned for more Senior Stay or Go TV.